and welcome to Books and Authors. I am Rom Gayoso, your host. So, this is the book show featured on Futures Television. There are many books out there, so the question is, where to start, right? You're in the right place. Just leave the digging for us. We will find top authors on a variety of subjects, and we'll go over some fantastic books, and you'll hear about perspectives from a variety of places. So actually, we're going to meet some fabulous authors today, and I'm going to take you literally on a trip. So we're going to start our trip in San Francisco, California. We're going to speak with Martin Schwern. He is the author of Small Data, Big Disruptions, How to Spot Signals of Change and Manage Uncertainty. We're going to then move on to Frankfurt, Germany, where we're going to meet Dr. Stefan Bergheim, author of Futures Open to Variety. Then we're going to go to Haifa to meet Dr. Avner Barnea. He's the author of We Never Expected That. Finally, on our way back to the United States, we will make a quick stop at the Kennedy Space Center, where we're going to meet Dr. Tom Lombardo, who will take us on a trip literally out of this world. So he's the author of The Evolutionary Mythology of the Future. So let me get started. And again, this is our literary journey of today, starting in San Francisco. Get your boarding passes ready. Gonna head towards Frankfurt, Germany. From Frankfurt, we're gonna then go to Haifa. Then from Haifa back to the United States. So let's get started with our first stop of the day. And we're gonna meet Martin Schwern. Again, he's the author of Small Data, Big Disruptions, How to Spot Signals of Change and Manage Uncertainty. So he's also Senior Advisor, Strategic Foresight at Business Finland, and he's helping startups and also incumbents to find their position in tomorrow's marketplace. He is also a regular contributor to IMCI magazine and a frequent guest at Reflections, Livestream, and Podcast, our media partners. So again, thank you so very much, Martin, for your being here with us. And Martin, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Everybody, thank you so much. Rom, thanks for having me again. This is great. Looking forward to the discussion.
Wonderful. So I have to ask you this question. Everybody else and their mothers talk about big data, and you focus on small data or weak signals or early signals. Why?
That's kind of counterintuitive, right? So the way it started out is actually because everybody was talking about big data. I was going, well, what I'm doing is essentially the opposite. So big data works in complicated recurring environments. So it's your factory, it is online clicks, it's consumer behavior. The more data you have, the better your operations, because you have a better understanding what's going on. In a strategic environment, though, it's kind of the opposite. It's when the shift happens. So the first 3 times you want to capture, by the time you're actually already at a big data of a shift in the environment, you end up with a situation that it's too late for you. So first data is important to make the strategic adjustments that are necessary.
Wonderful. Now, you talk a little bit about scanning, or quite a lot about scanning, right?
It's an entire book.
It's an entire book about scanning. So can you explain the 4-step process for capturing and analyzing information? I believe you call it FIPI. What's that?
Exactly. So you want to essentially dumb down the process. I'm a believer in simple processes rather than complex ones, because the world is complex and you kind of want to reduce the complexity. So you start out, the FIPI is filter, identify, prioritize, and initiate. So first you want to filter. You want to filter out the data that's really important. In the past, it was difficult to get information. Now we're swamped with information. So now it's really crucial to filter the bits and pieces that you believe give you an idea how the future might change. So it's particular types of information that indicate early change in the environment. Well, once you have that, you essentially want to put those data together and massage them and try to get an understanding what the patterns and the narratives are. So this is the identify patterns and develop narratives. So by putting a pattern together, you make your information robust. It's not a single data point anymore. You essentially have stuff that comes together. It's a part of sense making. But in order to really understand it, you need narratives. Narratives give you a chance to communicate what you're actually talking about. It's anchor points for your strategic thinking. Just having data by itself makes it difficult to really form a strategy around it. Once you have a narrative, it's much easier. Then you want to move on. Now you have certain developments that you identified, but you want to prioritize them. You want to see what is important for you. You cannot work on everything. So you want to make sure that you focus on what is high impact, what really affects you, and then what is short term or high uncertainty, that comes first. But you also want to keep in mind what could hit you 5 years down the road. And finally, the last step is initiate follow up steps. The issue here is this is the part that a lot of times is not done because people in the step before think, well, I'm now aware what might be happening. Aware is not good enough. You want to move over to preparedness. So you essentially want to get to the point where the rubber meets the road. I know what might be happening. If it's happening, I have a plan. There are examples. Mentioned it in my book. There's um, a publication from 2012, Infected, that talked about infectious diseases that spread around the world via traveling with masks and social distancing. I mean, it literally talked about what we're seeing now. So the awareness was there. Gates, Fauci talked about it, that this could happen. But as we know, the world was not prepared. You could even argue that the world moved in the opposite direction and got unprepared, so to speak. Those are the 4 steps that make it easy to extract information from the environment to then build a strategy that's hopefully more adjusted to what might come in the future.
So on the book, you really put a lot of emphasis on building the narrative, right? Building the story. So what is the importance of having or building a narrative here?
So, narratives are the way we operate. If I give you sheets of data, Excel charts, you might have learned how to interpret them. It's certainly not visceral. With narratives, you have the idea of campfire. You're sitting down, you tell a story, we follow. This is what we're used to. And when we develop an understanding, we can see, oh, this is how it comes together. Oh, there's a conflict. Maybe that's an issue. We also very easily see, well, wait a sec, there's a flaw or a fallacy. This doesn't go together. So you can, with the narrative, you actually can develop a strategy that's founded on something that you really understand. You can not only understand, you can also communicate it. So it's very easy for me, once I have the narrative, to go to you, Rome, and say, so here, I think we have a new development and we might have to adjust our strategy. And here is how this could all play out in the future, and you would understand it. If I just give you some numbers and trend lines, you might still have to put it in your mind, and it's not visceral. That's why I think narratives are very crucial to get everybody in an organization on the same page, and then obviously develop a strategy that makes sense.
Wonderful. So if I heard you correctly, so we have 3 key points there. So people will learn when they read your book, right? So one is understanding and managing weak signals.
Absolutely.
Two, the importance of adopting a scanning mindset, right?
Yes,
And then third is building a narrative, right?
absolutely. So you first, you want to look at weak signal as it weak means it doesn't necessarily have to happen. But you will be early on in identifying a potential change. And the earlier you are with identifying the potential, the more time you have to develop a strategy and keep in mind what could happen. You can really literally monitor and observe if the world is moving in that direction. So then the scanning mindset, is this a little bit of a funny one because decision makers and managers are not necessarily used to that. You focus on your business, your day-to-day work, your immediate competition. You don't really have time to look outside what is going on. So it is a bit of a change of pace to get used to. No, wait a sec. while I'm doing my day-to-day work, there might be a freight train from this side that's running me over, and I haven't seen that. So look outside, do it on a daily basis, monthly basis with a team, and also embed and institutionalize it internally in your organization. Just because you do it, you need communication channels and so on. Finally, the last one, the narrative we talked a little bit about, but perhaps two more comments. Think about a narrative as a Rubik's Cube. You have just one cube from one angle. You might not completely understand it. A narrative allows you to turn it around, to discuss with people what's going on the other side, how certain dynamics could influence each other. So in a way, the narrative is clearly the message, but it is also the messenger, because it
Oh.
makes it very easy for me to tell you the story in a way that is very intuitive and that then you can take away and you can actually respond very easily. If I give you numbers, how do you respond? You respond with a different percentage. That perhaps doesn't help. With a narrative, you can really think about what you
And
would
we
do
can
in the
relate
future.
to the narrative, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Well, you can find his book on Amazon. Also, the German version is on amazon.de. Kann man das Buch auch in amazon.de finden.
Aber natürlich.
Yeah. So best of luck with your new book. And again, thank you so very much, Martin. Always a pleasure to speak with you.
Rom, thank you so much. Really appreciate everybody out there. I appreciate the time you took.
Thank you so much. So let's continue with our trip. Let's go back to our handy dandy map. So we just left beautiful San Francisco, right? And now it's time for our next step, which is Frankfurt, Germany. And on this stop, we will meet Dr. Stefan Bergheim. So let me pull a little bit of information on Dr. Bergheim for a second. Let me pull his slide. Again, Dr. Stefan Bergheim, he is the author of Futures Open to Variety, a manual for the wise use of the later than now. So Dr. Bergheim is the lead researcher and director at the prestigious Center for Societal Progress, or ZGF, in Frankfurt, Germany. In addition to futures literacy, his work is very special and particularly interesting because he focuses on quality of life or well-being. So typically, economists tend to focus mostly on GDP data, but not Dr. Bergheim. Rather, he works to help us understand the complexity of life. And his report that is titled, that's the most recent one, The Happy Variety of Capitalism 2.0, which is available on the ZGF site, by the way, it guides us to think about other issues such as gender equity and tolerance, among others. He's also a very hard worker at advancing futures literacy, and this is really the reason why we're inviting him to speak with us today. So let's welcome Dr. Stefan Bergheim. He is the author of Futures Open to Variety. Dr. Bergheim, how are you? Welcome to the show. Sorry, I can't hear you. There you are.
Well, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, so much to talk about. I'm so happy you could be here. I have to pick on a couple of things from your book, at least the ones I found most interesting. The whole book is interesting. I hope you can come back for a longer talk. So I want to start on your chapter 4. Specifically, you advise us to, quote, involve many different people in futures work. So to you, what is the value of diversity?
Well, the value of diversity and variety, I mean, the book subtitle is Open to Variety, is to bring in a lot of information, to get a bigger picture of what's happening, to do the scanning that Martin just maybe talked about. And let me contrast this with the traditional way of dealing with futures in the industrial era, in the kind of command and control, cause and effect area. well, if you have an issue, if you have a topic, whatever it is in your factory, what do? You bring in an expert. Usually it's a male engineer historically, or an economist like myself, trained as a neoclassical economist. You bring some external people in who have the expertise, who analyze what the issue is, and they come up with a conclusion, and you enact it. But that's for complicated systems, for industrial systems. In our societies, and the think tank I'm running here in Frankfurt is called the Center for Societal Progress. So these are the issues I'm concerned with. Societal systems are complex systems, and you don't know the answer. You can't bring in one single know-it-all expert. What I think we need to do in complex systems is bringing a lot of voices, a lot of different perspectives to get the overall picture. Maybe some people who see things that I don't see, and there's a lot of things to be seen out there. And in those processes that we run, we go out to different areas, for example, here in Frankfurt, to the outskirts of Frankfurt. I call it the seldom heard voices. Others, I work with the national government in Germany, they called it the difficult to reach people, because it's not trivial actually to go out there and talk to those people who are not traditionally involved in this. So you get a bigger picture. You are better able to detect maybe also the weak signals and the new things that are coming up. So that's one value of it. And the other, especially in societal projects, is the project gets a lot more credibility by society. The buy-in is much stronger if you involve more people than just a small group of experts.
The usual suspects.
Yeah, the usual suspects, exactly. And whatever the topic is, there is always a group of usual suspects, and there's always a group of seldom heard voices. They might be very different depending on what the topic is. If you like do a project on the future of mobility and only involve so-called mobility experts, it will be too narrow. You need to involve the users, you need to involve people who know something about housing, because obviously, where do we move from our house to our work and to our education or to our entertainment area? So we bring in all sorts of different people, not trivial, to connect all those. And obviously you can't bring them all into the same room at the exact same time and everyone talks at the same time. That just doesn't work. You need to be quite smart about it and combine those voices in a pretty fruitful way.
Yeah, so because of your work at the center, and I know you're an authority on societal issues, right? I wanted to touch a little bit upon your chapter 10. It also called my attention. So the way I see it, our societies have gone increasingly radicalized for one reason or another, right? And do you have some thoughts on how to create a common future? I know you emphasize this quite a lot. So how can we do that? How can we create this common future, one that's more involving?
Yeah, I mean, it's really not trivial to create common sense of future, common idea of the future, and at the same time respect the diversity of perspectives. I mean, the book again is titled "Open to Variety." I do want to live as an individual, but also be part of something, maybe something bigger, some societal issues. Whether we have become more radicalized, I'm not so sure. I recall when I was very young, we had bombs going up here in Germany by the radical far left. I don't know, but what I think, what we are seeing is that people are moving apart from each other. People are following their own echo chambers and not just staying with like-minded, similar people. That I think I am observing. That is something we're seeing in Germany as well. And yes, my wish, my hope is that we communicate more with people who are different from ourselves. Not always talk to the same people who speak the same language, share the same ideas. I mean, that's easy. It's totally understandable. It's absolutely human to do that. But that's not going to hold a society together. We need to be able to communicate across the different spheres of society. So, which implies on the one hand, be open to people who are slightly different from how you are. Also approach people who might be different, and for those who have the resources, to also create opportunities where people with different backgrounds can meet and mingle. I mean, just a stupid example, maybe. I used to do my military service, which everyone in Germany had to do, which was a great opportunity to meet people from different backgrounds. I don't want to miss that as a personal experience. I mean, I'm not in the military, this, but meeting different people. And there's loads of opportunities that we can think of where this connecting, communicating can happen.
So it looks like we live increasingly or alongside tribes. So we have to find a way to kind of break those walls or silos so that we can get together. So if I understood correctly, you're saying the importance of commingling, meeting others, breaking down barriers, communicating more, right?
Right, exactly. Communicating, not give up myself, not give up my own identity and become someone else that I'm not, but be aware of myself and be aware of the many different other ways of being that are out there.
So along the lines, same lines, but in your book, I was intrigued by chapter 14, right? Can we really discover the future in a playful way? How can we play and discover the future?
I mean, we certainly can, and especially as I see from your facial expression, it's a lot of fun.
It
if
is.
we play with the future. We can build sculptures of the future, especially when we're talking about shared futures. It's a great opportunity to connect people when you invite them to create a sculpture of the future. They talk about it, they build it, they use their hands, they use language. This is great fun, very inspiring, and you discover new elements. Or you play with cards. You play with a thing from the future, for example. You create a thing in a specific future and you discuss. You connect with others by discussing in a playful way. And frankly, I mean, we all started as human beings. We started out playing when we were children. But somehow we were told not to play that much anymore. Maybe play soccer or
Grow up, I guess.
Yeah, be an adult and not stop playing or whatever. And why not play together? Play about important topics such as futures of society, of mobility, of the digital world, of health. There are so many issues out there that, and it's maybe you can also reach more people than with a highly educated serious academic conference on all those topics. I mean, we do need those as well. Mm-hmm. But I think we can bring in maybe also some of the seldom heard voices by using different techniques, different approaches. Use the arts, have people draw pictures, sketch their preferred futures together. I mean, this is what we do in the workshops that we offer. We ask people to create their images of the future and sketch them, draw them online. We make them look for images on the web. That's all possible. And it makes sense as well, also theoretically, because this is where our futures are determined. It's in our images, it's in our minds. We have images of futures. We have assumptions about futures, we have images, and those images determine what we actually do today. So why not imagine different futures together, ideally?
I guess what a wonderful way to make them a reality, right? So as you build a scripture or, do a drawing or create a poem or do a narrative, you build it, right, in real life, not just in the imaginary world. This is a beautiful, beautiful example. Oh, I cannot let you go without asking you a little bit about your digitalization works, right? So, was besonders ist gut leben digital? So what is good leben digital?
Good leben digital in English is what we call it as a longer term. It's quality of life in the digital age. Basically, that's the English title. And the idea behind that dialogue process that we ran a couple of years ago, and that is still, I think, super relevant, is that for me, I started out initially as an economist focusing on GDP, but then I turned into a quality of life researcher. And I connected with a lot of other quality of life researchers. And we ran quality of life projects, well-being projects at the local level in Frankfurt, at the national level with the national government. And what I observed in all those projects and communities was that there was hardly anything about digital tools. A bit of broadband access, yes, that was a topic, but beyond that, that was not really discussed. Initially also in the academic field. So I found that pretty sad because obviously digital is all over us. And at the same time, I observed from some of the big digital companies that they were claiming that our use of their products will increase our well-being, our quality of life. And I was wondering, well, wouldn't it make sense to connect those discourses? So talk to the quality of life inclined people. What does the digital world mean for quality of life from your perspective? And also talk to the digital people. What are the quality of life aspects that are involved in your products, in your projects that you do? So connect two different discourses. That was the underlying idea. Connect two different discourses that are not usually connected, that don't talk to each other. Basically, we're back again to getting people to talk to each other, getting people from different kind of worlds, maybe even different discourses to talk to each other, or at least talk to an intermediary, which in many cases I was, or my team was the intermediary. So we talked to the one side and then told the other side, okay, so this is what these people are talking about. What do you think about this and that? And then we created visions of what a good future, what a preferred future in the digital age might look like. We created indicators where we can measure whether we're there yet or whether there's a lot to do. And we identified some action points, some projects that help us get to this preferred future.
Wonderful. You know what is really amazing? It's when you have two economists talking, we usually come out with 3, if not 4 dissenting opinions, and we manage to have a sane conversation. So thank you. Thank you so very much. Again, always a pleasure to speak with you. So Dr. Prankheim's book is available on Amazon, and the original Zukunft offen für Vielfalt is also available on amazon.de. So let's continue on our journey. Again, thank you, Dr. Prankheim, and I hope to see you soon.
See you soon. Thanks a lot.
Let's pull up our handy dandy map. So we just left Frankfurt, Germany, and now we are on our way to the beautiful city of Haifa in Israel, where we're going to meet Dr. Avner Barnea, and he's the author of We Never Expected That. So let me pull some information here. Okay, so again, this is Dr. Avner Barnea. His book is We Never Expected That, a comparative study of failures in national and in business intelligence. So let me say a few words about Dr. Barnea. So he's very well known in the intelligence community. He is a member of the advisory board of the Society of Competitive Intelligence Professionals. He is also chairman of the Israel Competitive Intelligence Forum, and he is a research fellow at the National Security Study Center at the University of Haifa. So let's welcome Dr. Barnea to the show. Dr. Barnea, so wonderful to speak with you again.
Okay. Hello, Ron. How are
you?
Good to see you.
See, yes. Not just talk. I mean, it's a pleasure, and
exactly,
it's so great.
Exactly.
Great to have you here. So you know
yes,
what?
The same. I'm really very happy.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for making the book available in English, so we can now read it. It's a lot easier to read it in English. Thank you so much. So
Thank
many
you.
things to ask you. I hope we come back for a longer show and a longer discussion. Today, we're really just talking about your book. But I have to ask you a couple of questions that kind of come to mind. So traditionally, people think, or they thought, about national security and business as two separate compartments, right? But you say that there's a lot of benefit if we let those lines blurry a little bit, right? Is it really possible to use this experience gained in the business field to improve intelligence practices in national security and vice versa? How does that work?
Okay. How I started to investigate the question that you just have asked. So I had a long career with the Israeli intelligence community for almost 30 years. And after I retired, I thought to myself what I do, and I had an idea to enter to the area of competitive intelligence, and I am doing consulting and teaching in universities and in colleges in Israel about competitive intelligence, strategy, innovation, and I completed my PhD a few years ago, and I thought to myself, actually, when I am now exposed to the business world, I see the similarities to the national intelligence. Now, I am among the people, and my career is in business. I'm teaching programs, and I also teach in political science and international relations in what is called intelligence studies. So I'm divided into two areas.
You wear two hats.
And when I two hats, exactly. Sometimes it's a problem. I have a lesson in political science, and after a few hours, I'm in business. It's to move from one area to another. And I am among the people who think that intelligence studies or national intelligence is in a problem. It has reached from the discipline point of view, from methodology, to ceiling glass ceiling, meaning that intelligence for governments is not doing so well, and it's not finding a new areas or new bridges how to improve the quality of intelligence. And I asked myself why it is so. And because I was for so many years in intelligence community, I always I wasn't interested what's going in other areas. I thought that we in the intelligence community, we understand better how to do intelligence, bring better intelligence to the decision makers. And if it's not good now, it will be good in the future. But this is when you are practitioner, when you are professionals. But when you are to the academia, you ask yourself, okay, what can we do? And when I was exposed to the huge world of business research, I saw that there are so many tools that we can use in order to improve the national intelligence, as national intelligence can improve intelligence is business. And this was the basics of my concept when I started to do a research about these issues. And it took me years, and then I came up with actually I thought also that I have to do something to renew in different concepts. And then I thought to myself, I want to concentrate or to focus on strategic surprises. In business, can't live with intelligence surprises, with what we call strategic surprises. It's the leaders of country, they don't want, they want to know what's going on, and they really hate to be surprised. In business, it's quite the same. So So the problem is quite similar. And without good intelligence, you can't take decisions. Although leaders and leaders in business quite often ignore intelligence for reasons that I explain in my book. So I came up with two new concepts. I said to myself, strategy usually is what I call in my book concentrated surprise. What is the meaning of that? The meaning is that you recognize, who is your competitor. You monitor what he is doing in the present, and you try to understand where he's going. And if you are wrong, if you still there is an intelligent surprise, is because a major problem in the analysis of the information, lack of information. I will come back to this in a minute. Okay, so this is
now just a question. So the Yom Kippur would be an example of a concentrated surprise.
Of course, right, Rom. You're right. It's terrible. I'm teaching the students about Yom Kippur. Obviously, this is something I don't want to start talking about. I will tell you as an Israeli, it's a big shame. And so now we are 48 years since Yom Kippur War. People are discussing this issue as if it was yesterday, and they can't understand how we made such a mistake. And I have a lot of insights about it. So, and then we have something different. We have something which I call diffuse surprise. What is the meaning of, which is the new factor in the discipline of intelligence? The meaning is that you don't, the surprise is diffusing, is moving forward without anyone is developing. Okay, and no one, and you as intelligence want always to focus on those who are initiating the movements which reach to surprise, and you can't target them because they don't exist, because it's usually a spontaneous development, like progress, like it was, for example, in the 1979. The Khomeini revolution in Iran. Okay, so the crowds went out, started to wait against the government. No one actually led them. Khomeini arrived only a year after the Shah was moved from his chair. And I say in my book, I'm explaining, I'm showing a lot of other events like this. This is much more difficult for intelligence organizations to give a warning to the decision makers, because the intelligence is not doing its work, because they are very used to identify concentrated efforts by the other side and not diffused. In my book, I have 4 case studies. One of them, 2 in national intelligence and 2 in business. One of the national intelligence case study is the first intifada in the Palestinians authority, Palestinians against Israel in 1987. And Israel had a full control on the Palestinians as it has now in that years. And suddenly something happens which wasn't organized, wasn't orchestrated by the heads of the PLO, the head of the Palestinian authorities, and it all came from the underground. Suddenly it was developed, and Israel, which was focused on preventing terrorist attacks, didn't see that it's coming up and become more and more and more significant. And one day it was diffused. Okay, it became a major threat to the control of Israel in the territories. So this was a diffused surprise. And then I start to look at business, at the world of business, and I wanted to see if there is there. We know that there are a lot of concentrated surprise in businesses. For example, the collapse of Kodak was mainly by steps which was taken in the United States by Fuji, then and now a Japanese company that started to move into digital in photo, okay? And Kodak, which had more than thousands of registered patents, didn't see the threat coming. And when Fuji moved forward, it actually was the start of the end of Kodak, which took a few years until Kodak was out of business. Okay, so it can be also in business. Then you know your rival, you know your competitor, but you don't analyze rightly what are his intentions. And you say, and the Kodak said, okay, Fuji, Japanese, they don't know United States, they don't understand business, they focus on digital. Digital is not going to become big, so we know we have the conventional photography. This is the future. And then I started to look for diffused surprises. And I was able to find really quite a lot. By the way, in the book, I'm focused on the case study on concentrated surprise. Is on IBM, by the way, that in 1993 was almost collapsed, almost disappeared. IBM, the huge company, they simply they were focused on again, Big Blue, right? And they were focused on mainframes, and they didn't see that there are new companies that coming, and with the mini computers, with PC, although IBM had PC. And almost one day, it took more than one day, the value of the share went down that almost they couldn't operate anymore. So because they were so confident, IBM is the big thing, nobody can threat us, we are smarter and bigger than everybody else. So this is a concentrated. Now, if you move to diffused, we can see, yes, Ron? We can see also that there were.
Yes, so I think that it's a very big value, and I think was one of the key points of your book is really bringing about this distinction between concentrated and diffuse surprises. Yeah. So again, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I just want to remind people, Dr. Barnea's book is also available on Amazon.com. So thank you, Dr. Barnea. We'll continue on our trip, and I hope you can come back because I will have lots of questions.
Thank you so much. Yeah. There is more to talk about it. Good to see you. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. So let's go back to our map. We are just leaving the beautiful city of Haifa, and thank you, Dr. Barnea, for speaking with us. And we're going to make a quick stop at the Kennedy Space Center. We're going to board a rocket and literally go out of this world. And you thought only the billionaires could do that, right? Well, not really. Readers have been going places from the center of the Earth to the moon, to the stars and Mars and beyond on the wings of books for literally hundreds of years, okay? So let's get going on our last stop of the journey. And I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Tom Lombardo. He's the author of a series of books titled The Evolutionary Mythology of the Future. And he has 2 new books, not one. So he has volume 2, The Time Machine to Metropolis, and volume 3, Superman to Star Maker. So I have to say a few words before I welcome him. So really, among us futurists, he is seen as the authority in science fiction studies. He's an accomplished author. He's a fellow at the World Future Studies Federation, and he's the director at the Center for Future Consciousness here in Arizona. So let me welcome Dr. Lombardo. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yes, good morning, Ron. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you and everyone else.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. So many questions to ask. I have to start somewhere, right? And I hope you, and actually we do have a longer interview coming up. So we'll have more chance to talk about this. But recently you just published the 2 new books on your sci-fi series, right? The Evolutionary Mythology of Sci-Fi. Now you have volume 2, The Time Machine to Metropolis, and volume 3, Superman to Star Maker. So I have to ask you this. So how does science fiction influence our societies?
Yeah, that's a good starting point. I would want to add in there that not only does science fiction influence the evolution of human society, but the evolution of human society influences science fiction. It's a loop. And in fact, to connect with something that Martin introduced right at the beginning today, the power of science fiction, the reason why it can have such a big impact on human consciousness and human society is because science fiction is narratives. Science fiction is stories. And the human mind resonates to the story, to the drama of a story, much more readily than it does to data and abstract theories. And so, if one were to look at globally what discourses or visions of the future are most well known by the general population, it would be from science fiction. Now, of course, there's science fiction cinema, which has turned into the most influential and popular form of cinema in the last 40 years. But there is this tremendous history of science fiction literature, which, believe it or not, actually runs back all the way to ancient times. The first traveling into outer space was actually envisioned back around 0 AD. So science fiction influences human society because it creates credible and transcendent visions that inform and inspire us and warn us about different possible futures, about the dangers as well as the hopes and promises of tomorrow. And it does so in a dramatic form. The viewers may wonder why I call science fiction evolutionary mythology. And that's because science fiction evolved out of mythology, ancient mythology, and contains all the same qualities that ancient mythology had. The only difference between science fiction and ancient mythology is that science fiction is informed by contemporary scientific thought and contemporary thinking, as opposed to ancient mythology being informed by ancient theories of reality, which often involve deities and gods and goddesses, etc. So mythology, though, which deals with the fantastic and the transcendent, is something that humans resonate to, need, require. And actually, mythology has not gone away. Mythology is still very, very powerful within our collective consciousness, and it has taken the form of science fiction. So the stories of ancient gods and goddesses have been transformed into the stories of science fiction. And humans need that mythological inspiration, that big picture thinking, that that kind of consciousness that deals with ultimate issues, ultimate questions. And science fiction does that.
Yeah, so I sincerely hope that 1984 does not materialize. But you mentioned a couple of different works in your books, and specifically, you mentioned Metropolis, a classic, right? So in your view, what is the importance of Fritz Lang's work?
Yeah, just make a quick comment about 1984. Some aspects of 1984 clearly have come to pass. So it isn't a totally mistaken prediction, as well as Huxley's Brave New World. Aspects of that novel have come to pass as well. So just as an aside there, as we move along. Now, Fritz Lang and his wife, Thea von Harbo, were the co-creators of Metropolis. And Metropolis, of course, was a movie, but it was also a novel that came out simultaneous. And Metropolis is frequently seen as one of the greatest silent movies ever made, if not one of the greatest movies ever made. And it clearly is the best silent science fiction movie ever made. The significance of Metropolis is that Metropolis, in a very artistic and visually stunning and archetypal way, presents certain fundamental human themes about the nature of good and evil, the way in which humanity becomes subservient to reason and technology, how humanity can divide into the haves and the have-nots. It contains the archetypal theme of the Messiah who will come to save humanity. Metropolis is something that has to be seen in order to be understood, but it is a very rich and powerful, and I would say Dionysian, emphasizing passion and emotion, vision of the future. When it was produced around the same time the movie, well, a little bit later, was produced, Things to Come, which was based on H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come. Well, H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come was an extremely scholarly, articulate analysis of past, present, and future. But Metropolis was a much more successful movie than Wells' Things to Come was, because Metropolis was so in tune with human emotion, with fundamental human archetypes, with the issue of good and evil, and of sex, and of reason. It's filled with all of the pathos of human existence. And so it has stuck with us. And it clearly was art as well as being narrative. And the comment had come up earlier, I think Stefan mentioned the issue about art, is that when we think about the future, or we envision the future, one dimension of it is in fact the artistic. And Metropolis succeeds in that very well. Its own musical score, its own extremely elaborate sets, and as one center in it, we get that mesmeric and a captivating female robot, Futura, who is in one sense, an image of humanity becoming the machine, like the machine, and that female tempts humanity in the movie, and we succumb to it. But the robot in Metropolis is very erotic and represents the allure of the female and of the beauty of the machine. So there's an awful lot to Metropolis. I could talk about Metropolis for an hour, but if you haven't seen it, go watch it.
It's a beautiful movie, but I cannot let you go. And I know we're talking again in a longer interview, but you actually mentioned collective forms of intelligence. So is that something like the internet on steroids, or what you had in mind when you said that?
Yeah, good question. A common misconception about science fiction is it's just about the future of science and technology. Science fiction is about the future of everything. And one aspect of everything is human consciousness, mentality, the mind. How might that transform and evolve in the future? And many different science fiction writers have speculated on different possible ways in which intelligence or consciousness could emerge in the universe, could emerge in the future. And you picked on book 3, where I talk about it in the context of Olaf Stapleton, who was one of the greatest science fiction writers. And in his novel, Star Maker, discusses the possibility that all of the different forms of intelligence throughout the entire universe could unite together through technology and various forms of telepathy into a cosmic mind. And so, even though we have all of these individuals, at the same time, we have this cosmic intelligence that is a unified collective of trillions upon trillions of individual intelligences. But as I mentioned a minute ago, different science fiction writers have speculated on that. How could you get a collective intelligence with a lot of mechanical parts? You know, how could you get a collective intelligence that's like a swarm, like a bee swarm? Also, in more recently, in Vinor Vinji's A Fire Upon the Deep, we get a collective alien intelligence which is able to integrate together through sending out vibrations to each other. So science fiction is a place in which you can speculate on all different forms of consciousness and intelligence that we can encounter out in the universe, or we can encounter out into the distant future. Including in A Fire Upon the Deep, you also have a galactic internet that exists. But then, in fact, there's a great drama surrounding that. So, yeah, it's not exactly like the internet on steroids. It's more like the universe integrating together and becoming conscious of itself.
Oh, wonderful. I really wanted to thank you again for taking the time to share a little bit about your two, not one, but two new books, right? And again, just in time for the gift giving season, right?
Yeah,
so
I should also just mention quickly is that Victor Motti, the director of the World Future Study Federation, and myself did a series of dialogues on science fiction and its importance in human society. And if you go to Victor's website, Alternate Planetary Institute, you can get a free ebook of that series of dialogues. Yeah, we have the printed books that I have just come out with, and there's a free ebook if you're interested in getting a little more information on these books as well as other themes in science fiction.
Wonderful.
That has just come out. Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you so very much once more. So I guess our literary journey is basically or literally coming to an end. On behalf of Futures Television and this show, Books and Authors, I want to personally thank you for watching this episode. I wish to thank the authors once more, Martin Schwab, Dr. Bergheim, Dr. Barnier, and Dr. Lombardo for their taking the time to be with us here today. It is really an honor and a privilege. Please make sure you count the guests' books in your reading list. You find the links to the author's book on our YouTube page. I just heard about Victor's information. I will post the free ebook information as a link as well. So stay tuned, and I hope to see you again on yet another episode of Books and Authors.